In question time this afternoon. Getting back to the mining tax, though, for a look at the Coalition's position now on this, now that it's gone through Parliament. I'm joined by the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Matthias Cormann. Senator, thanks for your time.
Good to be here.
On the mining tax itself, the Henry Tax Review suggested the idea of a profits-based tax. Some of the big miners wanted to move away from the state royalties to a profits-based tax. This is what this tax is. You're saying you'd get rid of it and go back to the state-based royalties?
Well, this is not actually what this tax is. Ken Henry, you're quite right, recommended a national profit-based tax which would replace state and territory royalties. And, of course, the MRRT does not replace state and territory royalties. It comes on top of state and territory royalties and on top of company tax. It is a third layer of tax to be faced by the mining industry, which is, of course, a very important sector of our economy, the one sector that is doing well, and it's a sector that the government is desperate to slow down instead of speeding up those parts of the economy that are not doing so well at the moment.
But for the mining companies, they do get refunded for the state-based royalties under this tax. So it is...
Well, that's not right. They don't get refunded. Companies get a credit. And if we go back to the original Henry Tax Review proposal, it was about making our tax system simpler, fairer and less distorting. And it wanted in particular to remove distortions that Henry argued that the smaller and newer projects were facing from the royalty regime. Now, the smaller and newer projects will continue to pay royalties. They will not get a refund, and they will have all of the additional distortions and of course, ultimately, all of the additional tax imposed on them that comes from the MRRT.
Nonetheless, despite the fact that you obviously see big flaws in this tax, those experts in the Henry Review, the industry itself, do prefer the idea of a profits-based tax. Could you at least look at a better form of a profits-based tax for mining?
This MRRT is a dog's breakfast, and the reason it is a dog's breakfast is because Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan didn't do their homework. They negotiated the design of a tax exclusively and in secret with the three biggest miners. They excluded all of their competitors from the process. They excluded state and territory governments from the process. And of course, there was one political fix after the other that made it more and more complex. And importantly, we also know that the Gillard government did not seek advice on the constitutionality of the MRRT before the Prime Minister and the Treasurer signed on the dotted line.
Which is why you believe a High Court challenge, which the West Australian government has now said it will support, you believe this is going to succeed?
Well, I thought that the passage of the mining tax last night was going to be a Pyrrhic victory. It was always inevitable that the mining tax would end up before the High Court. On the face of it, this Labor Party mining tax is a federal tax on state property, which is prohibited under the Constitution. On the face of it, the mining tax arrangements constitute discrimination between states, which is also prohibited by the Constitution.
How does it discriminate between states?
Well, clearly, I mean, there is a case here where different states will be treated differently according to the way the state royalty credit arrangements will operate. I mean, I let the lawyers argue the toss in detail before the High Court, but my view very strongly is that on the face of it, there are serious question marks around the constitutionality of this tax. There are questions that the government has never properly addressed.
But you'll accept the High Court's verdict on this?
Obviously, we accept the High Court's verdict on this, but the point I would make, though, is that the government was very cocky and very confident and very assertive when it came to the constitutional status of their Malaysia people swap deal, and we, of course, know what the story was in relation to this. This is a government that never does its homework. This is a government that is fundamentally incompetent at its core. They were so desperate to sign a deal, they were so desperate for this mining tax cash grab that they would have signed anything. They didn't dot the I's, they didn't cross the T's, and I believe that ultimately, when it's all said and done, this will be scuttled in the High Court.
Nonetheless, the big miners have signed up to this. And it is, as I said, the sort of profits-based tax that they want, even though you've described the flaws you've seen it.
Well, the big miners negotiated the design of this tax in a way that suits their needs, in a way that makes it harder now for smaller and newer projects to compete with them. Andrew Forrest is on the record as saying if the mining tax had been in place in 2003, when he started FMG from nothing, FMG would not be here today. And of course, there's a lot of other smaller miners that were successful on the back of the work that Andrew Forrest did.
So this is going to scare away investment, you think?
Well, it's going to make it harder for smaller smaller and newer projects to get off the ground. And it's important for us to have people like Andrew Forrest and like the others that are out there who take risks, who start companies from nothing, who make investments, who create jobs, and who ultimately help us grow our economy.
The investment pipeline at the moment is now $450 billion in mining. That's been going up and up and up, despite the announcement of this tax. Exploration is now at an all-time high. It's not scaring off too many.
Well, I mean, right now, we are in a boom circumstance. We can't take the strength of the mining industry for granted. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't have your tax settings based on chasing whatever sector of the economy happens to be doing well right now. You've got to make sure that you've got tax settings that make you competitive internationally, that maximize your opportunities to grow your economy, to grow your trade over the long term. That is what we're committed to. We're committed to a tax system.
Sure, but you guys are saying that this tax will cut the legs off the industry. Yeah. You've said it'll kill the goose that lays the golden egg, and yet, as I say, exploration and investment is at record levels.
Well, very simply, I mean, what we were told is that the Henry Tax Review would lead to a simpler, fairer tax system that would be less distorting and that would be more efficient than the status quo. Manifestly, what is on the table and was passed by the Senate last night is more complex. We would argue it's less fair. It is more distorting on all of the tests that were set out there before the Henry Tax Review, this mining tax files. And then, of course, there is a question of the constitutional validity, and it is a tax package that leaves the budget worse off. I mean, only the Labour Party could come up with a multi-billion-dollar new tax and spend the money that would be collected from that tax so fast that they actually spend more than what the mining tax is going to raise.
Do you think it will raise the $10.6 billion over the next 3 years, the government forecasts?
Well, we don't know. I think there's serious question marks. The government, to this day, has refused to release their mining tax revenue assumptions. This is information, incidentally, which governments from both political persuasions, Labour and Coalition, in states like Western Australia and Queensland, publish as a matter of course in their budget papers.
So this commercial in confidence argument, you don't buy?
It is an absolute crock. Because, I mean, to take this argument by the Treasurer to its logical conclusion. So the Treasurer is really saying to us that not only are those three big miners the only ones who are allowed to design the key tax design features of the new mining tax, they're also the only ones allowed to know what the commodity price assumptions are that the government has used. I mean, how far can this government go in giving an unfair competitive advantage to just the big three multinational, multi-project and multi-commodity mining companies?
Now, the revenue, whether it's $10.6 billion less or more, it's going to pay for a few things, including a cut in the company tax rate. Now, the Coalition is saying you'll oppose that and you'll repeal that should you win the next election. Does that mean,
we will rescind the mining tax. We are in favour of company tax cuts, but we are in favour of company tax cuts without a mining tax.
So will you rescind the company tax cut?
Well, I mean, on the face of it, the government is unable to get the company tax cuts through the Parliament. I mean, that's the current status.
We get a company tax cut for small business through by July.
Well, let's be very clear. We are in favour of company tax cuts, but we will have our own policy around company tax cuts.
If they get this through, will the Coalition in government repeal it? Or
not? We will oppose all of the measures, all of the promises the government has attached to the mining tax.
In this Parliament?
And in the lead up to the next election, we will be releasing our policy around company tax cuts without a mining tax and our policy around income tax cuts without a carbon tax.
Can you say to me today that you won't go to the election effectively promising a tax increase?
I can tell you that taxes under the coalition will be lower than under a Labour government. That is our record.
Including for business?
Well, I mean, we will go to the next election with a modest company tax cut, one that is fully costed, fully funded, that is fiscally responsible. The problem with the Labour Party...
lower than Labour's
the Labour Party has actually not got any company tax cut legislation before the Parliament yet. They talk about it a lot. We just passed 11 mining tax bills with all of the other promises that were attached to it, passed through the Parliament yesterday. Where are the company tax cuts? We haven't actually seen them.
You've said that you'll always have lower taxes than Labor. Does that include for small business?
Well, we will be taking a policy to the next election where we will be promising modest company tax cuts. It's very important to actually understand this point here. The government talks about how this company tax cut they're promising is a company tax cut for small business. 70% of small businesses are not incorporated. 70% of small businesses will get nothing. All small businesses will be whacked with the cost of the increase in compulsory super from 9 to 12%. All small businesses will be whacked with the increased costs from the carbon tax.
That super increase.
I'm just making the point. This is a government which always increases costs for small businesses. This is a government that is whacking small business with the increased cost of the carbon tax without any compensation.
And the superannuation.
And superannuation.
Which, if you do come to government, only a little bit of it will have been increased. It's staggered over many years until 2020. And yet you've agreed to keep that increase going.
Well, I mean, what we've said is that we have voted against it in the House of Representatives. We voted against it in the Senate yesterday. We thought it was bad public policy, but we did say very clearly that if it gets passed by the Parliament, that is one measure that we will not rescind. The reason
were you happy with that?
The reason we've made that decision, which is obviously a united position from the coalition, is that ultimately, once people want certainty around their superannuation arrangements, and of course, in our judgment, that was an important thing to do.
And a final, completely separate question. Food security. In your joint party room meeting today, the Nationals MP Fiona Nash raised some concerns about foreign investment, which we know the Nationals are concerned about. In particular, they're wanting to have a lot more scrutiny of foreign investment in agricultural land, lowering the bar at which the Foreign Investment Review Board would intervene to take a look. What do you think about this?
Well, I'm obviously not going to talk about discussions inside the party room, but let me just make the general point. Foreign investment always has been and always will be important for Australia. We are having an internal discussion at the moment. There's a working group that is looking at the issues around foreign investment as it relates to agricultural land. Once that process has come to a conclusion, no doubt there will be some announcements around the coalition.
Do you have a principled position on this?
Well, the principled position is that clearly we've got to get the balance right. Foreign investment is important, but there are national interest considerations that have to be taken into account. We currently are having a debate within the coalition around that. That is what we do. We talk about policy in the coalition. Inside the Labor Party, they talk about each other. They are at each other's throat or with a knife in each other's back. Inside the coalition, we actually talk about policy.
All right. Matthias Cormann, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
After the break, we'll be talking